Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever the fuck you're tuning in. This is the two-man game episode of Backyard Buckets, brought to you by Backyard Sports. I got Bentley. Ryan's a little under the weather this week. We are wishing him better health and a quick recovery. But how are you doing, Bentley?
I am doing very well. Um, I have not had anyone, make cryptic statements on their social media about my job security, thinking maybe the time is up or things like that. Around 2:30 in the morning. So I feel pretty good about myself right now. I'm not sure Darvin Ham can say the same for himself, but whatever.
Yeah, that's a tough go. Let's start there, man. I kind of want to get your thoughts, right? So this isn't a topic we discussed in terms of this is an ad hoc one that I'm throwing at you because you brought it up, and it is important, right? Because it's the most famous person on the planet, basically, who happens to play on this team. Yeah. And these cryptic messages, we've seen this stuff before, right? Backhanded comments and not really throwing support back when Mike Brown got let go in Cleveland and some of these different things. What are your thoughts here? Like, is Darvin Ham the problem?
Well, I think the easiest answer is to say no, right? I think that they have a lack of talent, really. Like, they have guys that are like 8th and 9th guys that are playing important minutes for them. Right. Jared Vanderbilt is a guy that comes to mind. Rui Hachimura is a guy that comes to mind. Somebody that you and I are intimately familiar with. They lack a certain youthfulness to the roster. I know Gabe Vincent has been out for the majority of the season for them. That really hurts. He was a guy that when the deal was made for him to go to LA, I thought it was kind of a plug and play ideal fit for him. Truthfully, he just has not panned out for whatever reason there. So short answer is no. I don't think Darvin Ham is the problem. Conversely to that, I do not think he's the solution.
I think that's fair.
Growing a culture within a program is something that takes an extended amount of time to do, right? And it takes consistency on the coaching end. You and I were talking before we went live here about Doc Rivers specifically. Doc is someone that knows how to build a culture within a program, right? Now, when he gets to the playoffs, he gets outcoached within certain series, right? That's an X's and O's thing, right? But he's someone who knows how to cultivate a culture within a program. I don't know that Darvin Ham is that guy. Truthfully, I don't know that much about Darvin Ham, the person. I don't know. I know far more about Doc Rivers than I do about Darvin Ham. Right. Just because of Doc Rivers has been around forever in the coaching hierarchy, right? Darvin Ham has made so many changes to the rotation, to the starting lineup, to just the way he speaks with the media, the way he handles players. I can't get a bead on who he is, and I know that translates to the team, right? That translates to the locker room because they're with him every single day. And if you don't have consistency from the man who's supposed to be your on-court and off-court leader, it's tough to really buy into whatever he's selling, right? Couple that with the LeBron James that we all know, who, as you mentioned, has done this before, right? I think probably most famously the "don't fit out, fit in" tweet directed at Kevin Love for whatever, however we want to go about that. That'll come into play when we talk about Embiid and the 65 game thing, honestly.
Oh yeah.
So LeBron has done this throughout his career. You couple LeBron with the tweets and the constant trade talks, and the trade talks started like Christmas Day with the freaking Lakers, right? So there's always going to be talk around the Lakers. Couple that with Darvin Ham, and I'm not calling for someone's job, and I'm not trying to slander, but from the outside, it looks like it's tough to cultivate a culture within that Lakers locker room. I just, it's going poorly. It has been going poorly for about 2 seasons now.
Yeah.
Really, it. I don't want to call for his job, because when you fire someone, you have to hire someone.
Sure.
But they need to figure something out. I don't know what that is. I have thoughts. I don't know specifically what it is. I would love to hear your thoughts on the situation, though.
Yeah. I think you put it perfectly, right? He may not be the problem, but I don't know that he's the right guy for that team, right? And you said it as the solution. I think it might not necessarily be a good fit. And I think it really boils down to, I think this is what the end looks like for LeBron, right? And I know we've talked a lot about how productive he still is, but a lot of that, you look at that and those are offensive numbers, right? What isn't LeBron doing anymore? He's not chasing guys down and making game-changing blocks. He's not being the guy that really facilitates the offense in the way that he used to. LeBron used to make people around him better, right? And that was maybe never more evident than with Kevin Love Cavaliers, right? When they eventually won a title, it wasn't a great roster from top to bottom. It wasn't a great roster composition, but a rising tide, which is what LeBron used to be, raised all those boats and made them a championship contender and got them over the hump to win that title. And even early days LeBron in Cleveland, when they were making it to Eastern Conference Finals and making it to NBA Finals, wasn't a great roster, right? But he was elevating everybody around him. He's not that anymore. And I think he feels that and knows that, which is why he pushed so hard to get AD, who's supposed to be a supernova, into LA. And he thought maybe this could be the guy that I could hand the keys to the Ferrari, hand them over to AD, the way that he was talking about with Kyrie potentially in Cleveland, right?
Yeah.
So I think the writing is a bit on the wall. And I know I use the word end and it feels very abrupt and very terminal, but what's wild to think is, like, I'm saying that knowing full well that this is still a guy that goes 22 to 28, 8 boards, 6 assists a night, right? Like, if that's the end for you, that's a pretty fucking good end, right? But it's just the fact that he doesn't make everybody around him elevate the way he used to.
Yeah.
You can't hide a guy like Darvin Ham. You can't hide a guy like Ty Lue early on when he was first doing his thing before he was learning the ropes, because we had a lot of the same question marks about Ty Lue, and it wasn't great early in that stint, right? But it got better and it got better and it got better. I just think that the way you put it, not the problem, but not the solution, is a bit of it amplifies what we're seeing with LeBron being at the end of his career, obviously on the back 3 or 4, right? It's a pretty damn good end, right? From an individual perspective, but it's not good from a team perspective. And you can't have the way they had in Cleveland. You mentioned the 8s and 9s playing 3, 4, 5 role, right? You can't have that when you don't have LeBron raising everybody's game to the next level. And I think that's what we're seeing with this Lakers team.
Yeah, I like what you said there, saying you can't hide a guy like Darvin Ham. The coach is supposed to be the one to do those things, right? The coach is supposed to be the one to hide the inefficiencies within a team. We see it from the greats, right? You saw it from Greg Popovich when he was in San Antonio at the peak there. Those teams weren't perfect. Were they great? Absolutely, 100%. They became champions because of Greg Popovich, right? You see it in Golden State. Were they always the biggest or the most physical or whatever? Right. No, they had a game-changing guy, and then the coach fit a system around that guy, and he hit all the weaknesses that they had, right? Whether you take out the Durant years because they didn't really have any weaknesses, but whatever. Rick Carlisle, perfect example, 2011 Mavericks, right? That was a flawed team by many stretches of the imaginations, right?
They beat the Heatles.
Yeah, that's a coach doing the most with what he's given and hiding the inefficiencies within the program. And I just don't think that Darvin Ham is doing that. And I think that you laid it out perfectly there as well, saying that LeBron is no longer the rising tide to lift all boats. I mean, he's still a super phenomenal, very efficient, career 27, 7-7 guy. but he's not the supernova that used to make every single player on the court on his team better at every position.
Yep, absolutely. And I think to give another example, right? I know I mentioned Ty Lue a little bit, who went on to have some success after LeBron. Mike Brown did not. I don't know if Darvin Ham will, but the early years with Spo too. When Pat Riley made that hire, everybody was like, "What? The quality control guy is like taking over the team?" And there was some rocky stuff early on, but they were also figuring it out personnel wise. But they had the best LeBron. They had prime LeBron. They had prime Wade. They had prime Bosh, right? And I know Wade was kind of on the backside of his prime, but he was still one of the 5, 6, 7 best players in the world at the time. So you could allow Spo to kind of figure out what he was going to be as a head coach. You don't have that with the Lakers. You don't have that with Darvin Ham. And it's unfortunate for Darvin because, like you put it so eloquently, like, I don't know what he is. I don't know what to expect from him. He may be a great coach.
Sure.
He may just be ahead of his timeline and not prepared to handle a team like this. If he'd been given prime LeBron with an opportunity to grow for 6 to 8 months or a season or 2 seasons or 3 seasons like Spo was in Miami, maybe he becomes a great coach. I don't know, right? But right now it doesn't look good. However, on the flip side, LeBron's old team right now, Cleveland, holy shit, bud. Their last 10, they're 9-1.
Yep.
Garland's back. He looked good in his first game back last night. Not a super efficient night, but he looked like he was in basketball shape almost. I think as he comes along in the next week or two, they're starting to get healthy. We talked a little bit about maybe a month or so ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, that health was the main concern for the Cavaliers as they were kind of middling in the East. They've gotten hot. This looks like a dangerous team, man, and they aren't even 100% healthy yet. They've still got a piece or two that could make a real big difference for them. Evan Mobley, especially, right? That's the big name that, he's the guy that they're going to try to get back in and get him going because he's a phenomenal swing five, but also a really good defender, help defender, that sort of thing. So what are your thoughts on Cleveland, man? Are they a threat at the top of the East?
Yeah. You know that I've never been anyone to toot my own horn or proclaim myself correct in any situation, or even do callbacks to like preseason episodes where I said that Cleveland was the 4th best team in the East. I would just never do that. That's not who I am. But if you would allow me to be such a person, I believe if you go back to our preseason pod, I said that Cleveland was the 4th best team in the East, which is ironic because they're currently sitting at number 4 in the East. I mean, I'm a numbers guy.
Funny how that works out.
Yeah, like the 4 and 4 equals 4 type deal. Yeah. It is nice to see them have their full complementary group back. Right? And Mobley has played. I think he played Wednesday.
Yeah, they're bringing him along a little slower than Garland, but obviously the injury was different. So
and Garland is back. Like you said, not super efficient, but it doesn't matter when Donovan Mitchell is playing.
Yeah.
Otherworldly, absolutely lights out, playing at the level that they wanted him to play out and expected him to play out when they brought him over from Utah. This is a team that needs to figure out how to play Jared Allen and Evan Mobley together. Evan Mobley is a player who has uber amounts of potential. We saw it as a rookie, the defensive prowess that he has, his positioning, his length and athleticism is borderline unmatched. Maybe Vic and Giannis are up there with him. Jared Allen, Ryan mentioned it a couple weeks ago. Jared Allen is borderline all-star, right? I mean, he's one of the best. He might be the best big man in the East, not named Jokic or Embiid, excuse me. Like
he might be the best player nobody knows too.
Yeah, that's very true. That is very true.
I think I told you the story in chat. Like, I got a buddy who's playing in our fantasy football league who was like, "Who the fuck is Jared Allen? I have him on my team and he's crushing it. I don't even know who he is."
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to play against that guy every week, please.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of the Achilles heel of this team, though, and we saw it creep up last year specifically, was they struggled on offense when those two guys were on the court together. I think a lot of that has to do with because Mobley has not taken a step forward and he didn't progress any in his rookie year on the offensive end of the floor, right? He doesn't stretch the ball. He doesn't create extra space for the two slashing guards they have in Garland and Mitchell. He has a decent mid-range game. Like his pull-up is okay. He's best when attacking the basket. But in order to be an elite player, you have to add aspects to your game each and every year. You have to work on stuff in the offseason and come back with a new bag, as the kids call it, right? Like you have to have something new to present to the defense to make them hesitate to leave you open, right? Like that's something that Mobley has not done. And Jared Allen is a limited offensive player as it was, right? He's good at what he does. He's very good around the rim. His touch is incredible, right? He shoots high percentages at all times. I think if they're able to figure out the offensive side of the ball, because defensively they're fine in the front court, right? They struggle a little bit on the defensive end in the front court with Garland and Mitchell, but I think in the playoffs Mitchell can kind of lock down and play better defense. But it's so long as they're able to figure out the offensive end of the court in the front court, especially with those two guys on the court at the same time, then absolutely I think they could be a problem. They should have beaten the Knicks in the postseason last year. They got extremely outcoached by Thibodeau. JB Bickerstaff did not look ready for that. But I think that he probably has learned from that. I hope he's learned from that because I enjoy watching them play. So I'm going to stick with what I said. I think they could be the fourth best team in the East. They could win a playoff series. And who knows in the playoffs, right? Like Donovan Mitchell is as good as anyone. He could go in and he could upset somebody like a Philly if Embiid is not super healthy. Like who knows?
Yeah, go average 40 for a series. That's the level Donovan Mitchell can bring for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Evan Mobley's still on a minutes restriction. I just double checked. They're trying to keep him between 20 and 25. They haven't stretched him out yet. So that, we'll see how that develops. But on the offensive end, we saw this with the Nets too, right? When they had Allen and Jordan and they couldn't quite figure out who to play where. Can you put them on the floor together? Who's going to get more minutes? Who brings more to the table? So if they can figure that out, I think that's a big deal, right? If you can have those two players on the floor at the same time and not pay that price on the offensive end, I think you're right. But you mentioned it, right? When you have a big man whose strength is getting to the basket and getting into traffic, and you got another guy whose strength is putbacks and alley-oops, it's going to be tough, right? Because Mobley's not a pass-first big man, and he's probably never going to be. They're never going to ask him to be. So for him to be going to the basket, he's going to the basket with the intention of scoring, and you end up with Jared Allen around the hoop. It potentially clogs things up. So I think that's where a lot of the log jam kind of happens for them offensively. You gotta find a way to, I don't know, call the clear out or something, right? Whatever it is, you feel like you've got an opportunity to be a real contender in the East. And if this issue with Embiid is, lingering or nagging and continues into the playoffs, like suddenly you're maybe the third best team in the East, right? And you're looking at it saying, why not us, right? In a playoff series, you mentioned it, right? Donovan Mitchell can be a difference maker in a playoff series. So, yeah, I'm excited for what the Cavs have. I'm excited to see that they are getting healthy. They're getting a couple of borderline stars back with Garland and Mobley, and we'll see how Mobley played about 30, or Garland played about 30 minutes last night, which was encouraging because it means he felt really good.
Yeah.
Mobley, they're going to bring him back because I mentioned the knee, right? Garland's injury was a jaw. It was just a matter of getting him comfortable with his face and everything that comes along with an issue with your face in the game of basketball, which is very impactful. However, knee is a little bit more. You're going to be much more cautious with a knee. Bringing him back. So they're going to ease him back in, and as he gets more and more minutes, it'll be really interesting to see how he works in. Yeah, the Celtics have kind of separated themselves. I'm going to eat a little more crow this week. I did 2 weeks ago. I wasn't sure about the Kristaps Porzingis move. I wasn't sure that it was going to be the best move for them necessarily. I love what they've been able to do at the guard position, especially balancing Jalen and White and why is his name eluding me now?
Tatum?
My guy. No, fucking
Drew Holiday?
Holiday. Jesus Christ. I don't know why that was eluding me so much, but I love what they've been able to do to establish that rotation because I think at any given time they've got a lot of decent size on the floor at the guard position and they can defend kind of interchangeably. So they look pretty dangerous as long as Porzingis' health, right? Knock on wood for all you Celtics fans out there. He's had a couple of flare-ups, but nothing serious. As long as they've got him healthy for the playoffs, man, that looks like a very, very tough team. They're deep. They've got 4 really options on the offensive end. When they've got Tatum, Brown, White, and KP on the floor at the same time, that's 4 guys you can go to.
Yeah.
Because I don't think people understand how good Derek White really is, right? I think there's a lot of people out there I think there's a lot of people out there that don't understand how good Derek White fucking is.
Maybe the best NBA player ever to come out of a culinary institute.
That's fair.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, it might be. Who do you think has anything for the Celtics right now today? Who has anything for the Celtics in the playoffs?
Denver.
Okay. I like that answer.
I
don't think anybody in the East right now, the way I look at it right now, I'm with you. I think it's NBA Finals for the Celtics. It feels like.
I think it comes down to Denver specifically, and then Minnesota maybe, because they have so much size and defensive switchability and tenacity, and we have a large enough sample size. I think they've played 48 games. Minnesota has, and they still have a top 2 defense in the NBA. Like that's enough of a sample size for me to be able to buy in there. And I like their coach a lot. I think Minnesota has the better coach than do the Boston Celtics going into the playoffs with Chris Finch.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think what we've also seen from the Celtics this year is Joe with a whole offseason has put his stamp a little bit more on this team, I think. On top of being supremely fucking talented, that helps.
Yeah, I might be able to coach that team to 50 wins.
You might be able to.
Jason, you tired? All right. Drew, go get him.
Let me know when you want to get back in there.
Yeah. KP, you tired? Al Horford, go get him.
Yep.
Sure. Sam Hauser, go shoot some threes. Fuck it, throw Jordan Walsh in there.
Yeah. Yeah, they got a pretty good roster there for sure.
Yeah, call me in May though. Call me in May, Boston. I want to see what you guys do in the playoffs. They have been on the precipice of championships since the last decade?
Since Brad Stevens got there, really.
Yeah, I mean, they just haven't been able to do it.
No.
They ran into Steph Curry.
And then they ran into Jokic.
And then Jokic, yeah.
Oh. All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit. So you alluded to it a little bit ago, the 65-game threshold for postseason awards, right? We're starting to see a couple of contenders, right, get right up against the number or go over the number with these injuries. So I want to get your thoughts kind of in totality, right? What do you think of the NBA's approach to it? Is it a net positive for the NBA? Is it a net positive for the game? But also, I'm curious to see do you think there should be some sort of exception, right? Exceptional circumstance for a guy who has like a verifiable long-term sort of injury, or are you comfortable with kind of 65 to 65 and we're going to run with that?
Yeah. So this is a layered issue, I believe, in the NBA. There is the issue of the regular season awards being linked to number of games played. Well, number of games played.
Oh, yeah, the awards. Yeah, the awards.
As well as financial implications being linked to the regular season awards, right? So you have to play 65 games to make all NBA, and to be eligible for a Supermax extension, you have to make all NBA. So therefore, you have to play 65 games to be eligible for your Supermax extension. Let's just take, for example, John Morant. He already signed an extension, whatever. His contract is fine. Let's pretend that he was eligible for a Supermax extension this coming postseason. He's not going to make an All-NBA team because he's not going to play 65 games, which would in turn cost him, I believe the average difference between a max extension and Supermax is anywhere between $40 and $80 million, given whatever. There's financials, there's number stuff in there. we'll just say between $40 and $80 million on top of round even number 200 million that you would get for a max extension, right? So if you are saying that a player who does not play 65 games, like John Morant, who is obviously not eligible, but deserving of a supermax extension because that's how players stay in small markets like Memphis. You're saying that because he was injured this year and didn't play 65 games, he's going to miss out on $60 million because of circumstances outside of his control. I think that is ridiculous. And Paul Reed, backup center for Embiid in Philadelphia, he came out the other day and said, I don't remember signing anything that said I'm agreeing to this new season award being linked to playing 65 games. Now, is Paul Reed going to be affected by this rule? No. There's like 15 guys, 20 guys maybe in the NBA that this actually affects, right? Because you have 4 or 5 major awards, and then there's 15 all NBA guys. So, it's a small sample size of who this is actually affecting, but that small sample size are the players that people care about, right?
Yep.
It's the LeBrons, it's the Giannis, it's the Jokic, it's the Embiid in this case, he's missed 34 or 46 games. So whatever that difference comes out to, he's on pace at this rate to miss the 65 game mark, which would make him ineligible to win back-to-back MVPs, which he's arguably more deserving of the MVP this year than when he won it last year. So I think that I'm okay with if you link regular season awards to the 65 games played. I have no issue with that. My issue is that there are financials and contract obligations that are linked to these regular season awards, which are then in turn linked to the 65 game mark.
Yeah. That's a good point, right? And on the surface, I think this is a good thing for the game overall. And I say that as like the ecosystem, right? It's not just like it's good for the players, it's not just like it's good for the money, it's good for TV, it's good for the fans, right? We've talked about this with if I'm going to a Wizards game, right? And let's say Minnesota's in town and I don't get to watch Anthony Edwards put his head over the backboard, I'm going to be a little upset, right? Especially when the Wizards are down the way they are. And how many markets right now? There's probably 8 markets that are tanking basically to do what the Sixers did and just get a bunch of draft capital and eventually become a good team or build what the Warriors had building through the draft. So there's like 8 markets out of 30, which is over a quarter of the markets that you're trying to protect the interest of the fans. And I get it from the NBA's perspective, and I appreciate it that they understand players. They want to see the stars play when they go to these other markets. But you're also potentially hindering those markets from retaining those superstars because, as you put it, with Ja Morant as the example, right? If he isn't eligible for that supermax, then the team, what else do they have to negotiate? Because he's going to be able to get the same money if he goes anywhere else, right? He's not going to get $60 million extra from us when he can go to LA and play with LeBron or whatever, right? Like he could do those sorts of things. And then we're right kind of back to what we had prior to, the new money coming in with the TV deal and sort of evening things out and the effort that the Supermax originally was intended for, the bird rights and all those sorts of things that have added up to where teams can keep their players and save themselves a little bit on the luxury tax, et cetera, et cetera. It's a tough road though, right? And I think what happened really is the NBA made a good thing worse by doing another good thing, right? Adding the stipulation that like the all NBA teams could dictate getting those supermax contracts, I think was a good move because then like you get those players that they need to play to make those all NBA teams, but some of those guys were still kind of teetering on the 50 games played mark, etc. But then you added this other stipulation that also had impacts, and the two didn't mesh very well, right? And that's why I said, like, when you brought this up as a topic, I thought it was a really good topic because we're right at that mark right now that Embiid's teetering on not being eligible, right? And then potentially impacting his financial future, right? It could. He's not in a contract year, but if he was, right, it would impact his financial future. I think they've got to figure out a way, and I think the NBA does a pretty good job of this in terms of adjusting when they realize they've either gone too far one way or they haven't gone far enough. The NBA is not afraid to admit when they're wrong, and I think they're going to have to find a way. There's got to be exceptional circumstances, right? Guy blows a hammy and you see it on the court. Guy tears his ankle up, that sort of thing. Like, we've got to find a way. We've got to find a way to put a better effort at eliminating load management, which is what this was geared toward, right? We've got to find a better way to eliminate load management, but also not punish guys who actually do get hurt, right?
Yeah.
When they actually do get injured.
Yeah, we see it playing out in fruition with Tyrese Halliburton, right? Mm-hmm. Tyrese Halliburton got his extension. Cool. He still wants to be an All-NBA point guard, which he will be if he meets the threshold. But we all saw him freaking tear his groin or what it looked like on the court, right? He's back already. He's playing on a minutes restriction. Got it. But, like, he's already back on the court because he wants to get ramped up with his teammate Siakam and ready for a postseason push. But also because he wants to make an All-NBA team, right?
Exactly.
In years past, he probably sits out until February.
Sure.
Like, he probably, maybe even the All-Star break, right? Like, just like, hey, Hallie, like, chill out, dude. We got it.
Let's make sure you're 100%.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get Siakam moved in. We'll get him an apartment. Like,
you guys can hang out 5-on-5s in the training facility.
Exactly. Like, just, we're not going to put you through the rigmarole of gearing up for an NBA game, send you out there for 20 minutes, because that's what you have to play to be eligible to get your game tally logged, right? Exactly. We're not going to put you out there for 20 minutes and then sit you on the bench. Like, we're just going to go to the All-Star break and then let you be as hot as, like Gary says, fish grease for the rest of the season after that and make this All-NBA team, which you're deserving of.
Yep.
It's one of the larger issues I have with this is that the NBA put the onus on the players to play all these games and did nothing to address the schedule, right? It's still an 82-game schedule. They still have back-to-backs. Now, they did, going into last season, attempt to disperse of a lot of the back-to-backs, 5 games in 7 nights, stuff like that. They tried to spread it out.
They added, 2 weeks, I believe, to the calendar?
Yeah, but there were still guys load managing, right? Like, the guys that are going to load manage are going to find plays or games to miss to manage their minutes, right? Like, that's – I think at some point there will be a larger discussion about either extending the season once again or reducing games, which is something that will never happen because the owners will never go for that, right? You talked a lot about load management, and I did as well. I think that finding a way to allow these players more load management and then, without missing games is the goal, right? I don't know what the answer to that looks like, but I have to assume that there is some medical professional that can get with the CBA and the NBA, and they can all meet in a room and they can figure it out. They can say, we need to play fewer games. We need to play a longer, like a lengthened schedule to avoid some of the clustering. And then the NBA is going to say, okay, well, you have to play 65 games to get awards. And they're going to be like, okay, that's fine. But these are our stipulations. I want to play fewer games in a week and yada, yada, whatever, right? So there is a solution out there. I don't know that there's a perfect solution. I think I have no issue with, like I said, linking the awards to games played, but they need to find a way so where the games are not as congested so that these players who are injured and you need extra time to come back from injury don't miss as many games, right? Like Embiid, a lot of hell was raised about him not playing in Denver, which he has not done since 2019.
Yeah.
He was hurt. Like,
I know.
He tried to warm up and then he was hurt and then he missed the next game and then he came out and played against Golden State and looked awful and then got fell on by Kuminga and now he's hurt again. Yeah. It's like he should not have had to go out and play against Golden State because he clearly was injured. Yeah. Like, he was out on the court and looked terrible. It's like, that's an issue of him having to rush back because he knows he's well in place in the MVP race that he shouldn't have had to do.
Yeah, that's a good point too, right? The compounding injuries, right? We're asking guys to play nicked. We're asking guys to play below 100% and potentially introducing the possibility for, bigger injuries, longer term injuries. And look what happened to Embiid, right? He went from pushing himself to play, missing a game or two, or, potentially sitting out one here and one there, to out a little bit. And I don't know when the end is, right? But he's teetering, right?
Yeah.
You can only miss 17. I think you said he missed 12. I think it was what the number is so far this year. He's right about there, man.
It's 34 or 46, so 8 games, right? 34, 6, and 12.
12, yeah. So
12
a dozen
games
games.
so far.
He's almost there already, right? And we're not even at the All-Star break, so.
Yeah, that gives him 3 more games to miss. It's like,
I'd be curious to hear from the players if they would welcome a longer calendar. I know that 2 weeks was 2 weeks, and they added it, and they were able to get an agreement on it to eliminate things like the 3 and 5 that you mentioned, and the 5 and 7, that sort of thing, and back-to-back nights, less often, etc. I'd be curious to hear if they'd be willing to stretch it, if we added another 2 or maybe even another 4 and really kind of created a situation where you almost never played on consecutive nights, if that would be something that they would sign off on. I know that eats into the calendar of the off season, right? So instead of playing from, October to May, you might be playing from September to early June. Do you push the playoffs backward? I don't know, right? I don't know what the solution is necessarily, but I'd be really curious to hear from some, especially the higher profile players, if they would be amenable to that. Or if we do get to a point where there's less games and tickets just get more expensive, I guess. It's tough, right? Because you cut 10 games and you're starting to ask fans to pay a lot of money to go to a game because there's less. That's interesting. TV money, I don't think would change necessarily, but that's a lot of revenue, right?
Yeah.
Losing 10 games from all 30 teams. I'm not really sure how the owners would feel about that.
I can tell you how they'd feel about that. Again, this is only an issue that affects max 25 guys in the NBA, right? Yeah. So, like, there's 450 guys in the NBA.
But how much do those 25 guys also move the needle for the NBA?
Yeah, like,
right.
I mean,
it is a limited subset. You're absolutely right. It's like 8, 7, maybe even like 5% of the league's total roster.
Yeah,
but that 5% moves the needle for the entire league. So maybe it is that important of a topic that it could reverberate and make an actual change, or maybe it just becomes an exception, right? Maybe there's the exception for things like, call them catastrophic or whatever you want to call them, but exceptional circumstances for bigger injuries.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'd find a way to skirt that for load management.
Yeah, 100%. Be like, oh, I tore my Achilles. I'm only going to miss 2 weeks.
Though, I'm going to miss like 2 weeks though.
Yeah, I'm on that Aaron Rodgers recovery plan.
Yeah.
I'll be fine by All-Star
break. And ayahuasca.
Yeah, like to that point specifically of Achilles, but you mentioned compounding injuries, right? I alluded to it earlier with the Kevin Love stuff back in 2019 or whatever, when LeBron had that tweet, like, don't fit out, fit in, right? Yeah. So it was postseason, so it's a little different, right? But Kevin Love had hurt his calf muscle, like he had a calf strain. It was in the finals, and they're struggling, and LeBron was like, don't fit out, fit in, breaking, his dark 30 or whatever. And so Kevin Love comes back and then pops an Achilles on the same leg, and it's like, that's an example of someone rushing back from injury when they weren't ready, and then having a catastrophic injury, likely linked to that soft tissue issue they had going on prior to them being forced back in the lineup. It's like, those are things specifically from these needle movers that we're talking about within the NBA that you want to avoid. You don't want to see these guys go down with big-time injuries because that takes away from revenue. People turn their TVs off. People don't buy tickets. Like, that directly affects the financial impact of these teams that the ownership is just not going to go for.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd be curious how much the NBA, right? NBA playoffs, you're kind of in the swing of midseason with baseball. Obviously, you've got the All-Star game kind of around this time frame. You know, I wonder how much the NBA would worry about, right, taking eyes away from baseball, but how much would baseball try to convince them, hey man, leave us the fuck alone, or something along those lines? Because the NFL is king, basketball is prince, right? In America now, baseball is starting to make a little bit of a resurgence, but it's not moving TV dollars the way that at least not international TV dollars the way the NBA does, right? Baseball's still got all the regional, local dollars that they move a ton of, but I'd be curious to see, because I don't think the NBA would want to move too far left from October into early football season, because you're really at that point competing with the fervor of the NFL starting their season. Where the NBA sits right now, you can kind of catch some of the people that are their teams eliminated, like we are every year. You can get some of the people that want to tune in during the week, right? Because the NBA runs all week. Baseball starts up, and you start to get that competing on every night throughout the week, and you could see some of that. I don't know, man. I'll be curious to see how this plays out, because there's been the talk from the players of shortening the season in terms of the number of games, but the owners surely don't want to do that. Are we going to find a way to go? Is it another week on each end of the calendar year or something along those lines? I'm not really sure. Baseball's already done that with their playoff format.
Yeah.
They go into November and don't care if they're going to get snow in fucking Kansas City if they ever make the playoffs.
Yeah, the October Classic is now finishing up in November. It's like, geez. Here's an idea for you, right? And we talked about this with the in-season tournament. Toss a couple more weeks on the beginning of the NBA season. And previously they were running, Tuesdays and Friday nights for the in-season tournament?
I think that's what it was, yeah.
Move them all to Fridays. There's nothing else happening on Friday nights.
Out longer.
Yeah, just started 2 weeks sooner. Because it's already in the front half of the season anyways. You just add 2 weeks to the front of the season. Maybe the last week of the in-season tournament group play, you do that Tuesday, Friday. You know, the number they'd have to work with the schedule and the numbers there, but if we want to space the games out more, bring in more eyes early in the season, run the in-season tournament Friday nights because that's the only thing on. Do it Tuesday and Friday the last week because, again, that's the only thing on Tuesday and Friday, unless you're into college basketball like some of us degenerates here. And then you have the in-season tournament the same way you did it, this season.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. I don't envy the person that has to do the scheduling.
Nope.
But I think that's a good idea, right? Good suggestion. Oh man. All right, bud. Well, listen, we've covered a few things. What kind of closing remarks you got for us?
I got a question for you before we close out.
Let's do it.
There's been a lot of discourse around here, and there's been some crow eaten, and then there's been some crow regurgitated because it turns out the person who made the statement to begin with was actually right again. I don't exactly remember who that was. Again, it could have been anybody. I am, of course, referring to the Los Angeles Clippers post James Harden trade. They're 8-2 in their last 10, and they're up to third place in the West. Are they title contenders?
No, I don't think so. I could be wrong. Maybe I'll eat crow in May. But I think that they are very much built to win a bunch of regular season games. I don't know if that style of ball that they're playing with kind of just 3 different isolations and then Russ kind of running with the second unit and just being Russ and being reckless. I don't know if that works in the playoffs. And I am bracing, right, for the fact that I could be very wrong. But I just don't think when push comes to shove, I think this is a team that can win a series, but I think against Minnesota or Denver in the second round, I think this team is probably going to lose that series. So I think that's, for me right now, that's their ceiling, is the second round of the playoffs. I think that style of basketball struggles mightily in the playoffs, and we've seen it from a number of teams that have played that way. James Harden's been on quite a few of those teams that have struggled in the playoffs with that style of ball. I'm glad Ryan's not here to punch me through the screen for saying that, but
Russ Buckets over there does have that kind of wham bam shing-a-lang kind of thing going on, you know.
What about you, man? You were surprised when I said no. You think they are a title contender?
Yeah, we've seen it from two of their four superstars, right? If you want to throw Westbrook into that category still at this point in his career. Paul George early in his career made runs in the Eastern Conference. He just ran up against LeBron. Kawhi, we've seen it over and over again from him in the playoffs, to include last year or whatever year it was he tore his ACL in the playoffs, right? They have proven playoff guys. They have a proven playoff coach, Ty Lue, who I think is one of the best coaches in the NBA, specifically like mid-game X's and O's type coaching, right? Your dad brings up a good point.
Yeah.
Well, James took him up before it's over. That's kind of the X factor here for me, right? Is like even Westbrook has been to an NBA Finals. He's been to Western Conference Finals. Like Harden, if Harden is your least successful postseason player within your core group of guys, like I feel pretty good about that. You know, like Kawhi, health aside, right?
Sure.
If Kawhi is exactly assuming health. How many guys before Kawhi are you taking in a playoff series? Like, there's not many. The list is not super long.
No,
you know?
It's not.
I think they're very good. I think that they are. I know the isolation thing is a turnoff for a lot of people. It's a turnoff for me as well. It's not my most favorite type of ball to watch. But you have three guys who are capable of going out, and again, if you want to toss Russ in there, it could be four potentially, and giving you 35 a night. Like, and then if they don't have it one night, they have two or three other guys that can go out and fill it up. And, you know, I think they have so many options that they will be able to figure something out, right? That's the thing about playoffs, dude, is we talked about it with Doc Rivers, right? You played the same team 7 times. They have so many options. They're able to be so versatile on the court that I just think that they are able to figure it out, man. They have flexibility. They don't even play their small ball lineup all that much, right? They're still running like a power forward and a 5 out there. If they were to size down and run Kawhi at the 4, Plumlee at the 5, PG, whichever man they have on their team, Trey or Terrence, and then Harden, like that could be an intimidating lineup. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like Kawhi is big enough and strong enough to play the 4 with just about anybody in the NBA outside of, unfortunately, Minnesota and maybe, you know, Denver, who they're going to have to go through. Those are really the only teams in the West that give me pause outside of the Lakers, or excuse me, outside of the Clippers, because I don't think Oklahoma City is built for a playoff run. I don't think trades have not been finalized yet, right? They could potentially go out and bring in some more size.
Sure.
But I would keep an eye on the Clippers. I think they have what it takes to make a deep run in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think, you know, if they end up with, right now in standings, they would play Oklahoma City in the second round, right? If chalk held, right, if the top 4 teams won in the first round, they would play Oklahoma City, who sits at 2. I still think by the end of the season, Denver's going to be up in that top 2, 3. I mean, it's a fucking game that separates them between it's half a game to Oklahoma City, and it's a fucking game and a half to first place.
Yeah.
It's congested at the top. If the seeding kind of falls, you get to a Western Conference Finals, all bets are off. And I think you make a good point about Ty Lue as well, right? I think he is, if anybody can scheme it up, right, he's among the handful of guys that I think can scheme it up with that lineup. And you've seen it, right? They're winning a lot of games now after a slog at the beginning. And they seem to have figured it out, especially here as the regular season's picking up. And it's hard, right? Kawhi's a guy that he's like a Brady, he's like a Mahomes. Like, do you really bet against him in the playoffs? They're still there. I think what's happened to OKC is like they're not the darling anymore because they just keep winning. I think people aren't surprised anymore that they're winning. They sit in second place. They're as hot as anybody in the West. They're as talented as anybody in the West. I just think right now we're kind of in the middle portion of the season, and we're starting to just expect them to win games. And
They're also
when you get to that point, you're in a good spot.
They're extremely skinny. They will be bodied at some point.
Yeah.
And playoff basketball is so
Dude,
much
if they
different.
matched up with Minnesota in the playoffs,
That's worst case scenario for them, I think.
Anthony Edwards will body all of them, let alone fucking Gobert and Cat.
Yeah. Maybe not Dort. Dort could hold his own.
Dort's a fucking brick house, but
yeah, that dude should be playing fullback next week. Like or tight end, I guess. He'd probably be a tight end.
Yeah, he's tall. He's tall.
Yeah.
Maybe a little
how
too
tall
tall
these
for
guys
fullback,
are.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
you don't think about it because they're all tall, right? They just
Yeah.
look like normal human beings on a basketball court because they're all
Exactly.
tall, with the exception of like when Wemby or Chet or somebody's on the floor, you're like, Jesus, that guy's tall.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know that anything happened to Oklahoma City, to get back to the question. I'm not sure that anything happened, right? Like, it's just regular season, man. Like, these teams, playoff basketball is so much different. Things slow down. The game gets more physical. Refs tend to swallow their whistle a little bit more. Chet is not a big dude. He's super tall. He's very athletic. His balance is crazy. He's uber talented, right? But, like, and freaking Jokic is, 270? Like, he's going to bump you, and you're going to feel it, and you're going to move. Like, same with Cat, and Cat's not even that physical of a player, but like Gobert is, I mean, they're going to struggle at some point in the playoffs with the size and physicality of another team. Now, they may be able to overcome it. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're so fluid on offense. They play incredibly quick. SGA is that special that he might just be able to vault them over whatever team is in front of them. But at some point, they're going to struggle with the physicality of another team.
Speaking of SGA, real quick,
mm-hmm.
Did you see this from him when he came out of college?
No, God, no.
Golly. Has anybody, I can't remember somebody who, I had so little expectation coming out of college to become this guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he's an MVP, potentially the MVP of the league. And he was an afterthought in his own draft. He was an afterthought on his own team for 3 years? And then, he suddenly gets to OKC, and they're like, this guy can fucking play. We're just going to let him go.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. He has exceeded expectations by, a big fucking margin. Big fucking margin. Oh, all right, man. We'll bring us home. What you got? Closing thoughts here on the way out.
So as you know, I like to dabble in the gambling realm. Stick my fingers in here or there. I tried to find odds for combined men's and women's college basketball records.
Ooh.
Like totality regular season. I could not find them anywhere. I did my best. I have to imagine that if you listed all of the top probably preseason 25 for each men's and women's, if you were to say which combined men's and women's from these schools were going to have the best regular season records, nowhere on the list would you have seen University of South Carolina. But as I stand or sit in front of this microphone and this camera today, the University of South Carolina men's and women's basketball team on September 1st, 2024, have a combined 3 losses between the two of them. And one of them is not even ranked. Freaking cowards at the AP.
Crazy.
Yeah.
All those losses are for the men, too. The women are fucking unbelievable.
Yep. Last week I was telling y'all to watch the Carolina LSU women's game. Carolina with the big comeback.
Came back from double digits.
Yeah. Shout out Dawn Staley and those girls down there doing the damn thing. Paris Lamont, Courtesy King of Carolina. Got those boys. My favorite, there's a GIF of it. You can look it up. Oh my God, I forgot the guy's name. Talon, I believe his name is Talon, is his first name. At the end of the Tennessee game, he had been fouled consecutively, right? So he had 4 free throws to make. And he was talking shit the whole time, talking shit to the Tennessee players, makes all 4 free throws, looks at him, and throws up the silencer. And just chills, dude, chills. They beat Tennessee and or Kentucky and then Tennessee back to back, 2 top 10 teams. I'm a Gamecocks football fan, obviously, but I like to see the boys over on the hardwood doing their thing, and especially the women. The women, I mean, I don't know what you can say about Dawn Staley in that program, but
dynasty.
Yeah, it's just incredible to see the Gamecocks on top, for once. So shout out to those folks doing the thing down there in Columbia. It's wonderful to see 2 programs at the top where they belong.
Yeah. All right, so last thing from you, because spoiler alert for everybody out there, Bentley won't be here next week.
That's right.
We have the big game coming up next week. I'll get Ryan's pick next week. I'm going to get your pick this week. Chiefs are a 1.5-point dog. Niners, obviously we know what kind of juggernaut they are. We've seen what Kansas City's been over the last 3 weeks, turned it on in the playoffs. Who you got winning the Super Bowl, man? You got Irish Patty or you got Brock Purdy?
So I will tell you that I have, let's see, what are the current odds? You said -1.5, right? Or +1.5 for +1.5 for Kansas City.
Yep.
+1.5. Oh, I see them at 2.5.
Oh, it's up to 2.5.
Yeah, I see them at 2.5 at -115. I do already have a ticket for them at +2, which gave me -110 odds. I'm taking Kansas City to win. I bet them as soon as the line came available. I will bet them again. I assume I will be in a non-betting territory for the next 8 days of my life, which is unfortunate. So I will not be able to track the line as live, really. I'm going with Kansas City, dude. I'm not picking against Patrick Mahomes. You cannot make me. I will not do it. If I lose money betting on Patrick Mahomes, I feel justified in that, right? If I were to lose money betting on the Niners, I would feel like the dumbest person in the world because I bet against Patrick Mahomes. From now, mark this down. Whenever you ask this question of me and Patrick Mahomes is playing in a playoff game, who do you have winning? I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes.
All right.
Until Patrick Mahomes is no longer in the NFL. That's what I'm doing. I don't care. Enough. I'm taking Patrick Mahomes.
Fair enough. All right. Well, hey, I appreciate you. Excellent episode. Appreciate the comments, the interaction in the chat. This has been another episode of Backyard Buckets, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are